gold players, the backbone of the AoE4 community. Yet on the inside of every gold player, there's truly the heart of a platinum player. That's why I'm here today with another video, this time breaking down the common mistakes gold players make that are holding them back from platinum. I've been a coach for 2 years now. I've taken dozens of players from gold to platinum, and what I see across a lot of their gameplay is a lot of the same mistakes. That's why I want to share with you 4 things that if you can finally get right, will help you permanently graduate from gold to platinum. Let's get into it. Spend your resources, please. Whenever you hold on to resources, this is called float. So often I've seen gold players hold on to thousands of resources throughout a game, resources that could be units or upgrades that give you an advantage. Just spending your resources will give you a massive advantage in your game. The most common reason resources are not being spent, in my opinion, are hotkeys and military production buildings. When we do not use hotkeys, it means multiple actions have to be taken to build a unit. You have to click on the building, click where you want to rally, click how many units you want, and then do that for each building. This means players who are focused on macro in a fight or any other activity cannot spare the amount of clicks and thought it takes to do this. Compare that to hotkeying production. I put all my production on 4. That means that when I click 4, I can use the tab button to move through my different production buildings and quickly use a hotkey to queue up as many units as I want. This means I can do this all while keeping my screen on what I find important to look at, such as a fight, a raid, what have you. A lack of military production means that we often do not have the ability to even spend our resources. What often happens is gold players will build a few production buildings at the start of the game, then spend a large chunk of the game just on those few production buildings, and then they'll just drop a bunch later if they remember. Instead, adding production should be part of your macro cycle, a cyclical set of actions that you're always completing while you're doing other things that pop up in the game, such as making villagers, making units, and spending your resources. A good rule of thumb I use is that if I can queue more than 2 units per production building, I need to add more production. This is important because you could have the amount of units you need to beat your opponent's army, but if they're just sitting in a production queue, it means you have resources that are just being stalled. This will also mean you're quickly getting units on the field if you have enough production, giving you a huge advantage over an opponent who in your level probably doesn't have enough production buildings. Number 2, use your map control. Map control is when you have more military than your opponent, force them to stay in their base to defend, while you can freely move on the map. So often I see gold players not use the massive advantages having map control can do for you in a game. To make this easier to apply, let's break down the 3 big things you should do with map control. 1. Take the high value food on the map, usually being deer, boar, or shoreline fish. These 3 food sources have a much higher gather rate than sheep, farms, and berries, not counting Muslim civs, who can't use boar, but in exchange get boosted berries and other passive resources. Now usually we don't take these food resources because they're far away from your base. If you're playing aggressive, or if your opponent is playing very passive and not pushing, you can take these resources without worry. This is important because the increased food gathering means you can produce more units or move villagers off of food onto another resource and maintain the same level of food gathering you had before. For example, 8 vills on boar is roughly equal to 7.2 vills on shoreline fish. Yes, it's faster than boar. 9 vills on deer, 10 vills on farms or sheep, 11 vills on berries. Keep in mind, this is very upgrade dependent and how efficient you have your villagers set up on those resources. But in general, that shows how fast each resource is compared to the other. The second thing you can do with map control is deny resources from your opponent. This applies heavily to aggressive civs, but if you have map control, the greatest goal you should have is not allowing your opponent, who is most likely booming in some way or very defensive, to get out on resources that are not near their TC. Now, the greatest issue that often occurs is your opponent's resources are spread all over the map. It's hard to know where your opponent's villagers are. Splitting your army is not a good idea, as this allows your opponent to use their smaller army to take much better fights and reduce your military lead. Instead, either send 1 unit from your army to patrol near resources. This ensures that you won't grab them on accident using select all item military. The other option is to pull a vill to build towers, but this of course is expensive and time consuming for the vill. If it is deer or boar, you can use your camera to check the fog of war to see if they are on that resource. If their deer is gone or the boar is gone, but the symbol is still there, it means they're on that resource. Really important for you to have scouted fully though, and this won't work for wood, berries, or golden stone. If your opponent then sends vills out, you can use cavalry to do a quick raid, or rotate your whole army to kill vills and cut off resources. The travel time of their vills plus any dead vills would do massive damage to their resources. If they are denied gold, they can't age up. No wood means they can't make buildings. And food denial means no villagers, or at least vastly reduced food efficiency compared to food on the map. What I always tell people I coach is that if you see your opponent dropping farms, that means their eco is bad. They're spending resources per farm, and farms are not very fast, especially in feudal. Lastly, you can use map control to secure mid-map resources, relics, and sacred sites. This is more Castle Imperial focused, but still important to consider. In Castle and onward, resources near the starting TC will start to be scarce. Securing golds in the center of the map with keeps, towers, or walls means you can continue to get upgrades and powerful units while your opponent goes without. Grabbing relics of monks from a monastery and putting them in that monastery gives you a massive gold advantage, worth 100 gold per minute, so about 2 vils per relic. This is increased in Imperial with the upgrade Tithe Barns in the monastery, as relics now also produce 40 food, 40 wood, and 10 stone per minute. Lastly, sacred sites provide 100 gold per minute, and is also a vital win condition. If your opponent is playing a turtle style with lots of defensive structures and units but poor eco, it is often better to secure sacred sites and win that way. This prevents you losing units to defensive structures and swinging the game, and also forces your opponents to fight where you want, as you can also set up defenses near sacred sites to give you advantage in a fight. Number 3, use your military units to do something. Military units are made to do something. That can be defend, pressure, or attack. So often I watch games where gold players will make units and just sit in their base, having a vastly bigger army than their opponent, but not using it at all while their opponent gigabooms. We also see units not in the right spot defensively, or being thrown away under TC for no purpose. So let's do a quick breakdown of our military units and what to do with them. First thing to do with your units is defend. You are making units to protect villagers. Units should thus be placed at the most exposed resource, while walls and towers are used to protect villagers closer to the TC. If villagers are going far to resources, upgraded towers or walls are the safest way to buy time for reinforcements to come. Pressure and poking. This is when you move near the opponent's base to show yourself and force a reaction. This could be a raid, but it can also be you pulling your army up to show force. You can try to kill vills and push them off resources, but you aren't trying to take a full-on fight unless you see the opportunity. This is done to make your opponent wary of leaving base, but also force them to invest in units. This also allows you to either go out on good resources or invest in some sort of eco bonus, boom, or tech advantage, while your opponent reinvests in units to respond to pressure. If you're making both cavalry and infantry, it's also very common to send your cavalry out to raid or poke while you keep your infantry at home to defend, since your cavalry is fast and can escape bad situations. A common thing you will see in higher level games is the following sequence. Player A and B are both making units. Player A takes a good mid-map fight, forcing player B to back up. Player A then sends cav or some units to raid the side of player B's base, a poke if you will. This is done with cavalry since their speed allows them to disengage without issue. Player B is forced to invest into more units, afraid of being attacked and beaten. Player A uses this time to pull vills off of wood and onto food and gold to rush castle. Player B sees player A hit castle and pushes out to punish, knowing they have a military advantage since they have been investing in units while their opponent has put resources into going castle. Player A avoids the fight until they can get unit upgrades, keys blacksmith upgrades like +1 range defense, and make some castle units like men at arms or knights. They then take a fight, forcing player B back to their base, and often the game can be a quick end from there. In that case, the poke and raid is a powerful tool to keep the opponent stationary and blind, while you go an advantage that will make the next fight much more likely to be the game-ending fight. Attacking. This is when you take your whole army to actually push your opponent's base. That can be via siege like a ram, or just burning buildings or diving into TC to chase vills. You do this when you feel like you have a pretty significant military lead, which can come from the process of scouting or pressuring. This does not need to be a game-ending attack. Often feudal, the goal of this attack is a denial of resources, destruction of buildings, and killing some vills, allowing you to safely go castle, age up, and then finish the game. This often leads to the question of, what units do I make? Scouting and plan determine this. If you are playing aggressive, then cavalry is always a good start to quickly cross the map and pressure, followed up by archers or spears, depending on what your opponent goes for. If you are more defensive and booming, spears and archers are often a better defensive option. This is why having your scout near your opponent's base when they age up is so important. If you can catch their first unit choice, you can often hard counter it from the jump and get an initial advantage. And our last mistake to fix, reduce your variables. Now this one very much depends on what your goal is. If your goal is to climb ranks, this goal is for you. While the general strategies of the game are the same per civ, as well as the base goals I mentioned above, every civ in the game has a lot to consider and to adjust when you play them. How you open and play French is a lot different than Ayyubids or Byzantines. This is why when I coach people, I heavily suggest the following. 1. Stick to one civ. A big part of the game is the different civs, especially the love and attention the dev team has put into their design from play to art. Yet switching between civs constantly is a surefire way to lose constantly until you're in an elo where your general game skill and knowledge can carry you. This leads to my second point. Stick to one strategy, broadly. So much of the decision making that exists in the game boils down to reacting with a set of goals in mind to base those adjustments off of. Without a plan, even a basic one, you don't really have a reference to how you need to adjust in the moment compared to what your opponent does. On top of that, with how many civs there are in the game, you need to see how your chosen strategy interacts and how you need to adjust it in different scenarios and different civ. So to be clear, I'm not saying you don't make adjustments in game, but your adjustments should be leading to you still enacting your plan for success. I'll give you an example. Let's say my plan is to English longbow rush. How does this plan win? It works by cutting off my opponent's resources, primarily through the range and damage of longbows, leading to an eventual death push. It works because the Feudal Council Hall provides fast production of longbows. The longbow as a unit is strong, and the placement of towers near an opponent's base gives English an attack speed bonus that is massive for winning fights. It is also important to consider that the English feudal economy is really bad, with no special bonuses outside of boosted farms, which in feudal are still pretty eh. So if you can apply the pressure well, and you as English can use good food resources like deer or boar to improve your eco. How does this plan need to be adjusted? Let's give some examples. So let's say you're scouting and you scout your opponent open stables. You do not send your longbows, instead wait for barracks and spears, because they're making horsemen to counter your longbows. Once you have 3 spears, you push out to establish a position near your opponent. Since they're making units, you don't need to fear a fast castle or 2 TC, so you can instead play smart, play slow, build your mass, and take a good fight. In another version, you scout your opponent is already dropping towers on gold, with a lot of villagers on gold and is rushing castle. You insta-rally longbows across the map, since your opponent will have no units to stop them. The sooner you get longbows there, the better you can potentially stop another tower, shoot them off wood, or deny the food they may be on outside of TC range. You then rush blacksmith and siege engineering, so you can drop a ram as soon as possible and push the tower on gold to deny gold access. Since they won't have very many units, you can push this tower with only a few to force them off gold to make that castle a lot harder. In our last version, you scout your opponent is heavy on stone and going to TC. You insta-rally longbows across the map, since your opponent will have no units to stop them. You try to deny a good second TC spot and force one that doesn't protect any resources. You then quickly drop a tower on the front resource to provide vision and attack speed, and you also start adding spears when your opponent makes horsemen. You keep building your mass, rotating and poking your opponent's base till you have enough to drop a ram and push. In all those variations, my plan was still the same. I wanted to attack with a longbow rush, but in each version, I changed how fast I attack, when I send my units, what units I make, depending on how my opponent's opening, so my plan still works. Overall, doing these 2 things reduces the variables you need to account for as you're trying to learn the game. This doesn't mean you never try other civs or other strategies with your civ. You just need to ensure that you have a strong base of game knowledge and civ knowledge to work off of as you branch out.